Hey guys, it's Erik, owner of Farpoint Farms, and tonight I wanted to talk to you guys. I've been meaning to make this video for a while now about base stations and why I think base stations are important and why I think you should maybe consider getting a base station if you're into CB radio. A lot of guys do mobile installations. That's certainly the least expensive way to get into the hobby, I'd say. Get yourself a radio, plug it into a cigarette lighter, throw a magnetic antenna on the roof, and you're ready to go. And to that extent, it is really a useful and fun hobby. But to really get the most out of your radio, if you want to get into CB as a hobby and really talk to both locals and make contacts far away, you really need to think about getting into a base station. And there's different ways of doing that. As you can see behind me, what I have here is actually a mobile radio that's set up as a base station. And you can do that. You just need to add a power supply. Now, if you want to go all out, you can get a real base station. They haven't made, well, they still make, I guess Galaxy makes them. There's a couple manufacturers out there still making new stuff. But when I think of base stations, I think of purely like CB base stations, not ones that have export, functions. But like a base station CB would be like a unit in Washington, which I had for many years. A great AM sideband radio that sounded great, did great things, and was capable of reaching out and touching the world. A Cobra 142, I believe it is, this one here. Great radio. Obviously the Cobra 2000, which is pictured here, is probably what's known around as the best base station of the era and probably one of the best ones ever made, period. Great radio, has a frequency counter. It's just top of the line. Of course, you're going to pay a premium if you want to go that route, but of course with one of those radios or one of the many AM base stations that you can get. Radio Shack made a bunch like these two here. There's one and there's one. And Uniden made several. And gosh, there were a lot of manufacturers, especially in the 70s, that made base stations. So a lot of your AM only base stations are going to be 70s models, which there's nothing wrong with that. They might have some issues, so you want to make sure if you're buying one off eBay that it's been tested, because you never know. If it's been sitting too long, capacitors dry out, stuff like that. They get leaky. So as far as a real base station like those that we've just covered, those are nice because you plug them right into your 110 or 120 outlet here at the house and screw your antenna cabling into it, maybe ground the unit. It would be a great idea, and you're on the air. To use a mobile a mobile CB radio like this one here as a base, it's just one or two small extra steps. So there's not a whole lot to it. It's added extra expense of having to buy a power supply. I have another video that covers those more in depth, but briefly, in order to run a 12-volt car CB radio like this one off of 120, you need a converter. Radio Shack, which unfortunately it looks like isn't going to make it out of 2017, mass-produced tons of these things over the years. I have two great examples of them right next to me. This 3-amp one here you can find online used for, I'd say, no more than $15. Right now at their store, these are on clearance. This is a 19-amp converter, and what they do is they plug into your 120 volts and convert it to 12 volts, which is what this needs to run. The difference here, the amperage, 19 versus 3, that's just how many amps of power it's able to compensate for. So like this radio here, 3 amps is what I've been running this for the last, I'd say, probably 10 years. So 3 amps will run an average AM CB with sideband as long as it's stock. If you want to get into one of those export radios like a Galaxy or a Connex or something like that, something you'd find in a big rig truck that has some extra features, you probably want to move up to a 19 amp or 20 amps, something like this. There's different manufacturers. Pyramid makes a lot of amps like that. I'm sorry, power supplies like that. So you'd want to probably move up into something like that. That one there was on clearance. I think I paid $35 for it. Again, Radio Shack, they're closing left and right, so I don't know how hard or easy it'll be to find one at that price, but they're out there. So back to the radio setup. You've decided you want to take one out of your car and install it someplace, great. Or you've decided to go buy that unit in Washington, great. What's next? How do you get this thing set up and right? It's not a huge deal. Obviously, you're still going to need a mic, just like your car setup. One of the things I tend to do with my radios is I do ground the chassis to a ground outside. That would be a 4-foot or 8-foot copper rod or aluminum rod that you pound into the ground. You're going to use that to ground both the antenna and the radio. And you run wire from the radio and from the antenna to that ground rod. That's going to do two things. It's going to protect you some from lightning strikes, lessen the damage that it would cause, and secondly, it helps to keep what's called the noise floor down. Noise floor is the static. I've got tube lighting in here. Incandescent lighting sometimes creates background vibrations or harmonics. I have a computer out here and a VCR out here. If I was watching TV out here, I could get vibrations or harmonic vibrations from that you're going to hear in the radio. That's your noise. The better grounded it is, the higher quality of cabling you use, that level drops down. And the lower the noise floor, the lower that level is, the better you can hear people talking. And that means being able to listen and talk to and communicate with people farther away. And that's what makes the hobby kind of cool, is being able to make those long distance contacts, talking from the East Coast to the West Coast, or up into Canada, or down into South America, or hell, sometimes all the way over the oceans and into Australia and into Britain, which is amazing on a 4 or 12 watt radio. That's really what makes this hobby fun. You're going to have a much harder time doing that in a mobile installation, because cars make noise, ignition noises, computer noises, fuel pumps, all that stuff that's running, that all contributes to that background noise, that hum, that harmonics that you hear in your radio. And no matter how good an installation you put or how great the cabling is, it's just more of it. So it makes it more difficult to make long distance contacts in a mobile. Certainly not impossible. I do it every once in a while, but it's harder to make those conditions work for you. Go back to base station setups. Mobile or base, if you decide to get a plug-in, you're going to need that. You've got your amplifying, you've got your power supply, you've got your radio. The next thing you need to consider is the cabling going from here to the antenna. Now, I would recommend, and I just had a conversation with a fellow YouTuber about this. They were asking about setting one up, and they wanted to know what to use. They kind of sent me a list of things they had found. They had a unit in 880 SSB, great radio for this kind of a setup. They had a power supply for it. Cabling wise, they were going to go with RG8 or RGX8X. Either way, those are decent cabling for a mobile installation, probably A-OK. For a base station, if you would spend the extra bucks, you can see, I don't know how well you can see it, that is RG213. It is about as thick as my pinky is, where the RG8 is usually about as thick as a pencil. And that extra insulation makes a huge difference in being able to get more of your signal out to the antenna and more signal in from your antenna, all the while keeping out all this background noise, all this radiation, these transmissions that are coming off of objects we don't really want transmitting around us. So the biggest plus, the biggest cool thing you can do for your base station setup is to invest in a higher quality of cable. And that's that RG213 cable. You can get that on Amazon, probably eBay as well. That brings me to the second part is, depending on how far from your radio to the antenna we're talking about, depends on how much cabling you need. One thing to consider is it's better to buy more than less. And the reason why that is if I put this radio in and I buy a 50-foot run of cable, and I run it up and it turns out I am 8 feet short to where my antenna is going to actually be located, then I have to go out and buy another 10-foot piece, right? You wouldn't think that'd be a big issue, but every time there's a connector, every time two wires have to be screwed together and you have a barrel connector or a terminator anywhere in the system, that is a loss of gain. That is a loss of signal in both directions, and in a place for garbage to come in, a place for all these, these transmissions that are coming from bulbs and computers and TV sets and everything else. That's areas that stuff can get in. So your best bet for a really good base station setup is to buy, if you think you need 50, get a 100-foot run. You can do that, and then, hey, what if you want to raise your antenna a little bit higher off the roof? You have extra cabling and you're ready to go. So I highly recommend that. Right now I've got one single 100-foot run, and I have enough room for maybe an extra 15 feet if I can push the pole up a little higher. And I'm planning on doing that in another video. I've bought some steel conduit. I'm going to be making my own tower, so to speak, that'll go on the top of this building. And that leads us to what's connected there, and that is your antenna. And that's probably that's a tough one. You can get a radio used for a very good price. The cabling, you're kind of stuck buying it new unless you happen to come across one at a yard sale, but I've never seen anything like that in the wild. Antennas are the same way. People have CB radios and they think they're worth something, so they hang on to them and throw them in the closet, but they don't hang on to the antennas. They don't think they have any worth, so it's very hard to find a used one. That being said, if you decide to buy a new antenna, you have many choices. You can go crazy and get, stacked beams where you have 4 or 5 large antenna beams, 18 feet tall, and you can angle that thing with an antenna rotor. I mean, that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. For most people, you're going to go with what's called a beam antenna, a pole antenna, just a regular stick, the big stick, right? The popular ones made today would be the Antron A99, which is what I have here. It's been in production, I think, since maybe the late 70s, early 80s. Someone can correct me on that. It was SolarCon. Now I think it's owned by somebody else. It's paying, you know, but the antenna design is the same. Is it the greatest antenna out there? Nope, nope, no way. But is it good value for its money, and does it hold up well? So certainly. And other brands would be a Mako. Mako makes a 5/8 antenna. That's a good antenna, a little more expensive, but I've heard nobody say anything bad about one that I can recall. Then there's the Shakespeare Big Stick. That's another pole antenna, you know, 18-foot antenna. And that's also, and you'd have to find one of these new old stock somewhere, but Radio Shack used to sell that under its Archer brand as the Archer Crossbow. That was their base antenna. And before I had my Antron, I had an Archer Crossbow. I had it for, gosh, I'm thinking almost 12 years, 13 years. Finally died, not so much the signal was an issue, but the fiberglass that it was made out of succumbed to the environment. You know, it just started to flake apart, and it finally cracked in a windstorm. So the Antron's been up there since, geez, 2002, I'm thinking. And what are we in, 2017? So that's pretty good, 15 years, it's up there. It's also survived a move. So, good antenna. What I liked about the Antron as opposed to the Crossbow needed some adjustments to get the SWRs low. The Antron, when I plugged it in, man, it was like right dead bottom, perfect right off the bat. So I got to give them, you know, good review for that. The Mako, I haven't ever tried one of those, or Mako, whatever. It's not Matco, that's a tool, but the 5/8 antenna they have there. So that pretty much covers your base station installations. So let's cover it one more time. You're either going to need a real base station like one of these two here, this Uniden or this Cobra, or you're going to need a nice mobile radio that you know, works off of 12 volts, and you'll need a power supply like these here. And then it comes to the wiring and the grounding, and you're definitely going to want to have good ground on both. Run a ground wire from your antenna mast down and ground the crap out of it, and do the same thing with your radio if possible. And the wiring for the antenna itself, yeah, you want to buy something like this. It's RG213. This is an Amazon one. It's not cheap. It's probably going to cost you the same amount as your antenna, but it's going to give you the same amount of performance gains as a good antenna versus a crappy antenna. So don't hamstring yourself by buying a really nice antenna and putting some really cheap wiring in between it. And then lastly, you're back in here, and it's one more thing I want to talk about with these radios. If you're going to go with a base station, may I recommend that you get one with sideband, because that's where all the fun is these days on base station conversations. I have a pretty good spot up here in the mountains for listening and talking, so I'm actually able to talk with a few local groups who do communicate on AM. They also run sideband too, and some nights, depending on the weather conditions, they'll run sideband as opposed to on AM because the range and clarity are better. So if you're going to get one, may I say, instead of getting like a Cobra 29, which is a great radio, but only AM, that you should invest in something that has sideband, new or used. As long as it has sideband and it's a 40-channel radio, you're going to open up a really cool world. Channel 36 and Channel 38, those are like happening pretty much 24/7. There's always somebody out there calling for a contact. So you have somebody you can talk to. Then on the AM, you know, it's nightly. Around here, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from about 7 o'clock till midnight, the old timers and some of the younger guys get together and we just talk about the good old days. We talk radios, we talk about life, we talk about farming. Same kind of stuff we do on the internet, but a little more relaxed. But that's it. One beautiful class that you've just learned all you need to know about base station setups. And I hope to hear that some of you guys are going to do this. Go out and get yourself a used radio. Go out and, hell, you can make an antenna. There's plenty of sites out there. You know, some wire and some fiberglass, and make your own antenna. Build something. Slap it up there on the roof. If you don't have a tower, you don't need a tower. I don't have a tower. Get yourself a pair of brackets off of wherever. Amazon, I think, is where I got mine. And take a 10-foot piece of steel conduit. Mount the antenna to that. That puts it, gosh, I think mine's about 40 feet in the air right now, and this is just a 1.5-story garage here. I'm hoping to make it maybe another 10 feet higher than that. Maybe I'll be able to talk even farther. Hope to see you on the radio. I've been kind of rambling, I guess, tonight. I don't know. Just kind of excited about this. I hope to see y'all and or listen to y'all out there in CB world. And I'm Eric, owner of Farpoint Farms. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. There'll be more like it. If you have any requests or any ideas as to what you want to see next as far as CB, tractors, life, farming, gardening, whatever, animals, cars, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, which I should be with the amount of gray in my beard, right? I'll see you next time. Take care.